aware of reports that 7 Essendon players have taken legal advice on the possibility of suing the club for mental and possibly physical distress in the future?
Well, I wasn't aware of that, Neil, till you mentioned it, and I respect the rights of players to take whatever legal advice they wish. They're being independently advised at the moment. It's worth pointing out, however, that of the 34 players that received show cause notices, and we don't know who they are, 14 are no longer at the club, so it may well be those players.
Do you, the bottom line in this is whether, despite all the subtleties and the complexities behind the scenes, do you accept that Essendon did something wrong?
Look, we have accepted and been punished accordingly for a disrepute charge, and we've accepted that, and we've never complained about that. I would point out, so has James Hird. He's still serving his 12-month suspension.
Well, yes, but he says under duress. He doesn't seem to believe he did anything wrong, does he?
Well, I know that you may think that, but it's worth remembering too that James was not allowed to talk. The AFL weren't allowing him to talk as part of a settlement agreement. Essendon, to some extent, weren't allowing James to talk, and also with the court proceedings underway. So I think it's, in fairness to James, he hasn't been in a position to be talking.
To get back to the point, did Essendon do the wrong thing?
Look, my view is that Essendon have accepted responsibility for what has been proven. I am still of the view that we did not take performance-enhancing drugs with the information that's in front of us. If there's more information out there, then clearly I can't reference that.
Did you take banned drugs?
Well, whether it was banned or performance-enhancing, it's still an area that ASADA have a different view on to the club, and to some extent I had hoped that this court hearing may show us some of the information and some of the evidence that has been missing so far. Well, we were disappointed there.
How many of the current board members were actually there at the time this happened?
Probably about half of the current board members, and
so why are they still on the board?
Well, why would you remove someone from a board if there hasn't been proof that something happened that should not have happened? Certainly, people make mistakes. Clubs made mistakes. The club was operating in an environment that was less than perfect. However, I would suggest to you that by allowing those current members to stay on the board, we've been able to engineer now, I believe, a very strong and a very transparent workplace.
But you're an extremely successful businessman. In the corporate world, these people wouldn't have kept their jobs, would they?
Well, all I can say to you is that what we have done is what we believed was in the best interest of the footy club, and that was to use the talent we had in the boardroom and the executive team to take the club forward. I would remind you that the club was pretty much decimated by people that were a lot closer to the so-called decisions that ultimately had these charges laid against us. A lot of those people have gone. The board, however, I believe now is a very strong board to take the club forward.
So who in the end carries responsibility?
Well, responsibility for what?
Well, so many people have gone, and you say they've gone because of what happened. Something untoward has happened, clearly.
Well, we have accepted responsibility, Neil, for the charges surrounding disrepute. We have accepted those. The charges that we don't accept are that the players took performance-enhancing drugs, and until they can be proven, that's our point of view.
James Hird will be at the club next year, unequivocally?
Unequivocally, yes.
Will he have any involvement before the end of the year?
Well, he's still serving his suspension for the next 2 weeks, approximately, and as soon as that's finished, James will be re-engaging with the club in planning next year's campaign.
He seemed to, in his evidence, be critical of the club doctor, Bruce Reid. Is that correct?
Well, I'm not sure what evidence you're referring to. I think that James hasn't spoken publicly about what he believes did happen, and I'm hopeful at some point in the future that will happen. James will speak.
Do you have any gag on him?
We've had a gag on James until his suspension is effectively finished, and then James will be encouraged to re-engage with our members, our supporters, and the football community.
Just in very simple terms, do you have any concern at all for the health of the players?
Of course, absolutely, and that's why we've cooperated with the AFL now, putting testing in place. In fact, the testing's been in place right from the outset, so this is just formalising those testing.
So why the concern if nothing untoward's happened?
Well, I think it's responsible that we should be testing our players, because if something did happen, and as I said before, we don't know if it did, we don't believe it did, but we don't want to take the players' health for granted.
Has this got a long way to go yet?
I sincerely hope not. As I said earlier, Neil, we're looking for a circuit breaker if we can find one. It is possible that this federal case now will determine that the process was unlawful, and in that situation we could find that the show cause notices go as a result of that, but it's too early to tell.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Neil.
The chair of the Essendon Football Club, Paul Little.